You know, I was kind of blown away by this film. I want to start with The Fly.
Okay.
And shooting a freaking fly in can you talk about, was this always in the script, that not only the presence of the fly, but the capturing of the fly, if you will, that moment of zen in the film?
Yeah.
Where did this kind of fly element come into effect?
So first I'll say that the fly is actually fake in the movie. But the whole thing about the presence is the symbolism from the protagonist and the actual fly.
Yeah.
I wanted to make it as a nuisance basically throughout the whole movie, that she is basically like a fly. She comes in, does her thing, goes back out. And she bothers people. And that's what mostly flies are. When you sit down and you're eating, it's just this constant thing that you want to swat at. And that's what I wanted to have a resemblance between the fly and my protagonist.
I love how there's the question of why are you here, and it's answered by her not only saying, well, you know, giving something oblivious of, well, you know, and then that's the moment she captures the fly. She's set herself in. Was that always? Did you have that moment of click click in the script?
I did. Mm-hmm.
Where did that idea come from? I love that moment of the fly's arrived and it's there and it's going to impact you. That fascinating to watch that scene unfold.
Yeah, so I actually co-wrote the movie with a guy named Rainier Murillo. He's based off out of Florida, but we both went to school at UT, and so we both collaborated with it. And so I think that was actually his idea about like bringing in this element of capturing the fly to basically symbolize this whole thing about trapping yourself into something that maybe or may not be good for you. And so that was the whole thing. It was a very difficult, beat-wise. We went through so many drafts, so many times where we had to like take a break from the actual script because being involved and trying to write with it sometimes, like, I think you get so over convoluted with everything that you have to take a break and all of a sudden you might be sitting in a coffee shop and be like, oh, I got it. Like, I think I know where this beat's gonna happen. And I felt like for me that was the midpoint. And when he brought it up, the whole thing about, capturing herself in, because finally it's this point that she knows that she cannot go back out the way she came in. And she's basically, all of a sudden she's not going to be the same person after this one moment that she decides that she's the one that wants to put herself for sure in this fate.
Wow.
Yeah.
The growth of the fly. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your move to Austin and shooting in Austin and what has it meant to you to have gone through that UT program? Because last time we went to your talk, you were just about to leave. And what has UT meant to you, not UTA, but UT Austin, meant to you as a filmmaker, and how did it impact the casting, the shooting, and all that involved with this film?
I think it's impacted me very positively. It's helped me grow as a person. I've always also, I think, moving down there, got to know definitely other people that are from around the country, and so we brought in even different perspectives from different backgrounds, different races, different ethnicities, different cultures. And so I think collaborating with even my cohort and people outside my cohort that are in a different department, they brought in different elements that were able to help me really understand, I think, the world better. Specifically, also, I made friends like people that were in the MA program that are study students, and so specifically, my friend Rebecca, who's also actually, she's a producer on my film, she studies and knows, she's doing a separate study than what I would do, but I think she brought in a different element that was like, okay, very critical. I was able to really dissect the script and saying, okay, I don't think this is being represented right. I don't think this is being represented good. And also just getting different people to read my script that come in either from the PhD program, like my roommate, who does, studies out there on Latinos and population. And so it's really trying to bring in an authentic voice as best as possible with the art direction. Does this art really represent Mike's characters, right?
Yeah.
Is it cliche or is it not? Because my movie doesn't represent like Latinos as a whole. It just represents people, but also people in a specific community that could be almost universal also too.
But it gives it a cultural ground where they live, the whole presence of kind of the separation of her family and that whole dynamic. We never see those characters. They're only mentioned in a phone call, but yet they're fully impactful of her character. And that, I think, adds to the whole Latino feel, but yet does make it more universal, because you could have cast anyone in any race in this element. That must have been fun to play with that, and to not just be stuck in that dynamic, but you did get to also keep it cultural and keep it something that you wanted to showcase and be proud of. Is it kind of crazy to be able to accomplish all that?
Yes, and you try to do as best as possible, and there's always room for growth, and you're always like, oh, I could have done this better, but I do feel, we did the best that we could. I had a lot of people come in and study the script, make sure that it was as best as possible. Make sure, for me, it's, did I feel the green light, and do they also feel the green light? And then at the bottom line is like, okay, I think we're ready to shoot, So I do feel accomplished, but of course, always room for growth.
Well, I'm going to ask about, the sexuality in it. We don't see anything grotesque or anything weird or crazy. It's very innocent, and yet when you figure out the relationship of these two characters, that dynamic explodes in what you think about it. Where did that idea come from, the whole cousin element and kissing cousin element? That must have been something fun to play with, and once we, I think, figure that out fully as an audience, it gives it such a different dynamic on every level, for her and for him, and the way they interact. What was that part of the script like writing, and where did that come from?
Well, I'll say it was very hard, because it's not my personal story, but it's a good friend of mine. It's her personal story, and first it's just getting her okay with me telling the story as best as possible. So I think from that I felt very close to the story as well, just because we all grow with family, and so it's, for me, I'm like, okay, how's my family gonna take it? I'm telling a story about this, and that's what the thing is it was very difficult, I think, I think for my own just comfort level on it. But I think at the bottom line was like, okay, this is a story that happens, and this is a story that we don't necessarily hear also that often, and so I think I needed to do that, needed to tell the story, because it's a different element that I feel like I haven't seen in film yet. But I think the bottom line, it was fun, but it was a difficult decision, I think, to do it at first. I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Well, to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, the reaction of that truth, or when the mother arrives, and her reaction to what is going on, and we don't necessarily know if she knows that there is that type of connection between these cousins, but when the fly escapes finally, the mother's reaction is obviously good riddance, but the son, there is that yearning. He wanted it. That's another side I didn't expect. That must have been fun to play with, that side of it, the sexuality of the older generation thinking, oh, you can't do that, but this younger generation, well, no, I am attracted to her, and there is that sexual tension. You're playing with that through the entire movie, just on looks. That must have been a lot of fun. It
was, and again, it was very difficult because we don't want to hit something very on the nose quite yet, and because it is such a short film, I think we had the benefit of playing with our audience for that. Also, we have to bring it real quick in to make sure hopefully people are still interested. But it's like, okay, we're seeing this relationship that we've seen so many times already, but all of a sudden I wanted to bringing up the next level of, okay, this is why it feels redundant. We have seen a relationship like this in many screens, right? But we haven't seen this type of relationship. And I think that's what it was, our surprising element to make the film interesting. But also, too, it's same time, I think because comes always from personal, either my experiences or from friends around me, I think that's what was difficult. But I will say, when I did decide to finally do it, a lot of people actually came out and saying, this stuff happened when I was a kid, or I knew a cousin, or I knew my sister, or, that did this, or my brother, and it's actually very common. It's just, I guess for me, we never really talked about it, and once I felt I brought a dialogue open, or I guess once I felt like I was able to speak about it, I felt like dialogue was able to come in, and so we talked about it, and so I felt like it's our own little group, oh, okay, well, tell me about this. And so it was just basically the research, and I had one story, but then also I get to hear other people's stories of how they grew up, and so then I felt like with my crew and my cast, I was able to really connect with a lot of them, and I think for me, I think it felt like a family, I think, at the bottom of it.
How cathartic is it making films for you? Your films have always had that connection to you, or they've at least had some connection to you. How cathartic is filmmaking for you?
I mean,
obviously it's fun.
it's fun. Yeah, no, it definitely is fun. But I think if anything, it has to. I make sure that for me, I'm gonna pick the best cast and crew, for specifically crew too, because for me, I want to make sure that they're invested in the story or somehow find a connection about it. It doesn't mean that they've gone through that same experience, but something that may be an element of it that they feel invested in it. Because I always feel that I want this to be a family. I don't want it just to be like another film, just to like do it, right? But it's always, I feel like, has to have a lot of meaning and at least move people. And I think when you have that, specifically your DP, your gaffer, your AD, it's easier dialogue, and you're able to convey, your concept and then collaborate together, because then they bring in their own taste and like, oh, well, I want to do this. So I think when they're more invested, it's like magic happens. Yeah.
Talking about the DP shooting in that particular house, what was it like finding that house, shooting in it, and then the choices of how you get through the house, if you know what I mean, and get back to the kitchen, like that. There's a circle, it feels like, back from the door in to the door out. You don't have another door. Was it fun to work in that environment? It
was. So I like to keep everything very simple. I want to make sure that we have either like one area and very few characters. And so it was actually very difficult first to find the location, because I'm trying to find something in East Austin or West Austin. But for me, I kept thinking, okay, I live in East Austin right now. And so I felt like the type of home I was looking for was more of a home I think I grew up in DFW, or at least the homes I also grew up with my friends, going to their houses. And so I was looking, I think, something very more similar to how I grew up. And I feel like a lot of the houses I saw in like West Austin were not the houses that I were looking for. So I finally did, and then when we were in the side of the location, it was very fun blocking. It was very hard. It was very difficult, because we're like, okay, we have to do this, and then we have to be here, and then we have to like go here, but we have to switch around. I actually camera opted a couple of times, because my DP was like, you should totally do it, and I was like, okay, this will be really fun, because I'm like, because sometimes we'll do one take here, but then I like to have this interpretation of like, all right, let's just have a roaming camera and see what happens. Because I do come from a documentary background, and I feel like, to me, when something spontaneous happens sometimes, I think that's what beauty happens too, and you get someone else's perspective, whoever the camera op is. But in short, though, we actually created a lighting grid in the house. And so what we did, our DP, we had like 3 lights. So everything's actually staged. All the lighting's not natural. It's all
even with like the window.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah. So we wanted to make sure it was controlled, so that we knew that it was a 2-day shoot, and we wanted to be there a full day, and we knew the lighting and the shadows were going to be changing. So we needed to create a lighting grid outside of the house.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And so from each take, we would just adjust basically.
You don't see it. I mean, I felt like that was natural. Mm-hmm. That was really well done.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. I've got to ask, title-wise, sticking with The Fly, I know that might have been the writing partner's added element, but I kept harping back to Yaki and Wolf, and how Wolf he could have easily changed that title, but having it animalistic, elemented to the character and connected to the character, and obviously Fly connects to your character. I'm not trying to say there's a connection there, but keeping it simple and keeping it with that title, how does that impact your film? Because you could change a title in like Kissing Cousins, for instance, and your whole film is completely different. How powerful it is to have that particular title and to not do it in English. What does that mean to you to have it in Spanish and be that powerful?
Yeah, so I'm a Spanglish speaker, so I speak both Spanish and English, but I actually mostly speak English. So having a Spanish title for me is just, I actually grew up saying MOSCA instead of fly. So anytime with my family, I'm like, hey, there's a MOSCA in here, and there's always these funny stories with MOSCAs, and I think that's where the MOSCA element came in. Because it's always family-centric, where we eat, and there's always like a fly in there. So I feel like I'm going to make another movie about moscas. But I think having a very simple title, I've always been a big fan of simple titles, one words, and it's usually symbolic, I think, or there's an element in the movie that centers around that, basically. And with the fly is like the main thing that kind of journeys the character, and so I felt like, to me, it made more sense to say Mosca and make it The Fly as the title. So yeah, but the reason I did put it in Spanish was because I grew up saying fly in Spanish, even though I'm mostly an English speaker.
So I've got to ask, now that you've traversed down to Austin, what's next for you? Is that where you do you want to like? Is Texas always going to be home, or do you want to expand outside? I mean, what's next for you as far as a filmmaker?
So right now I'm actually getting prepared to work on my thesis film. So I'm entering my third year at UT as a grad student. I still don't know yet what I'm doing for that, but I do know actually MOSCA is going to be expanded to a feature. So I have.
Wow.
Thank you. Yes. So my co-writer is actually going to be the lead writer on that, and he's going to be writing the feature for that. And I mean, it's still going to be another 3-4 years until we have something, but at least we're starting right now. So for me, that's the far future. That most likely will be shot here in Texas. I love Texas, my home. I don't know yet if it will move somewhere else. It just depends what happens in 2 or 3 years. But I think I'll probably be traveling in and out a lot of the state.
Yeah. I've got to ask, what has it meant to you to go down to Austin and just personally, not even just as a filmmaker, how's that changed you as a person?
I think it's actually helped me grow a lot. I will say it's been actually a little difficult, I think, in writing sometimes, because I feel like when I write, I need to be in a place that I've been in for a while. It's getting easier to write down there, just because now I've been there 3 years. I feel more acquainted where I'm at, and I feel like wherever you're at, there's like a history or presence that you need, that I feel like inspires, at least myself. So I think it's getting easier. I actually, the last year was a very fun year. I loved it. It was a lot of fun, and it's becoming one of my big favorite cities, I think, to be at. But yeah, I think part of me still miss DFW a lot. I have my family up here, my boyfriend as well. But I think being in Austin, I think overall it's been a very positive experience. I've grown a whole lot, so I'm looking forward that to the next year.
I know you haven't thought up the thesis yet, but will it have a Latino theme? Will that always be a theme, or I mean, obviously it'll change over time, but will you stick with that?
Well, yes. My main goal as a filmmaker is to always cast Latino actors, that is Chicanos or Mexican American or Mexican, or people in Peru, Venezuela. My main actor, the mom is actually Venezuelan.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. And for me, it's just I feel like it's a duty for me to create an outlet for Latino filmmakers, but also actors and actresses to be on film, and that isn't just because I feel like we don't have enough representation on a lot of levels, and I feel like that's my duty as a filmmaker.
You know, I've got to ask, because your last film that we talked about, you cast in Mexico, you had actual Mexican actors. With this, was she cast in Austin, or? She was
for this film right here?
Yeah.
She was, yes. So the casting was very difficult too, because trying to figure out like someone who looked young. But she's actually, she auditioned for me for my first film that I did in Austin, my first, narrative short. And but I really liked her, and she's new to this whole acting. But I've realized that she has dedication and she's good and she can listen, and so I casted her. But she's actually she lives in San Antonio.
Okay.
Yeah, but I looked all over the state for like a bunch of people.
Is it cool to have this vast of a state? I mean, you've filmed with Iki in San Antonio. Mm-hmm. You've experienced 3 major cities. I mean, there's so much more to do, but you can go anywhere with this. You can go anywhere in this state. How important is it for you to be a Texan filmmaker?
I think it's very important. I grew up here. I wasn't born here, but I grew up here, and I feel like this is where my life, a lot of things happened here. So it's very important. I have family everywhere. So I think like having those connections down, also in San Antonio, like I have family there, family in El Paso, Lubbock, But for me, it's like I'm more family centric in the DFW area where my family lives. But it's very important. I think it's very important.
Well, I've got to ask the last question. Where can we find more info about the short, but also just keeping track of you and what's next for you? Obviously, thesis, but hopefully down the road, a feature with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm available on Twitter or on Instagram. MOSCA has a Facebook also, so you can I think it's facebook.com/MOSCA film. But yeah, you can find us online for sure.
Perfect. Well, Lizette, it's always a pleasure. always been amazed at the way you shoot your films and how powerful they are.
Thank you.
And thank you for making another great film.
Thank you.